G'day, hello South Australia, how you doing? This is Tom Schmidt here. Lee and Anna just asked me to record a bit of a short video, just giving you some thoughts and any updates or new ideas or anything like that. So I'm just going to throw a few things around, nothing amazing or whatever, but just some of the stuff of things I've been learning or discovering or hearing that I think might be useful for you. So yeah, I'm just going to take some time to do that. First of all, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and the effort and caring enough to actually come back and have this discussion and actually go, okay, what can we do in our churches? How can we create a culture, create an environment where young people and young adults' faith is nurtured and grown and celebrated and really engaged with? So I want to thank you very much for that. That is actually a huge step just in itself, that you care enough to be here and to be involved in something like this. So thank you so much. Thoughts. I've been reading again recently about the clash between modernity and postmodernity, and the fact that the reality that a lot of our churches, a lot of this conversation is really a bit of a cultural clash in that sense, between modernity and postmodernity, just in our ways of seeing things, and that creates postmodernity. I don't think it's something we need to be afraid of. I don't think it's something that, is going to be the end of Christianity or church or anything like that. But at the same time, I think it poses some really good questions for us and actually challenges us to look at a lot of things. And I think a lot of the language you hear young adults talk about and a lot of their critique of church life actually comes out of their postmodern worldview. And I think a lot of the reaction or pushback against that comes out of a modern worldview. And so we're going to realize that when a young adult talks about wanting authenticity and wants some variety or different or change, that kind of stuff, that actually comes out of a postmodern worldview where, postmodernity doesn't say, well, here is one right way, here is the pure way, here is the correct way to worship, do church, liturgy, whatever. They're saying, okay, where's some good stuff in that, but let's have some room to explore and try something different and try something new and see if there's something else as well. And so that's just a completely different way of viewing the world, of viewing what is true and what is right, and how do we discover truth, purity, right, and even a skepticism of if someone claims that they've got the best, only true way, then there's some skepticism of that, whether that's around worship practices or whether that's around theology and having all the right theology as well. It doesn't mean that postmodernity or young adults have a weaker faith or in some kind of faith crisis. It's just that they see things differently, and truth is more of a fluid thing for them. It doesn't mean they're not grounded in some really solid groundings, but also they realize that a lot of things that some people say this is the only way, they realize that there's more than one way. So they wouldn't question things like Jesus and the Trinity, and the death and resurrection of Christ and that kind of stuff. But as far as things that they rightly understand as more flexible, like how we worship or our views on lots of different less central theology things, that's something we need to grapple with and ask, how do we engage with that? And in the end, the important thing is not to be afraid of whether they're going to believe the right thing or not. Again, this is a clash between modernity and postmodernity. We don't need to be afraid of whether they're going to believe the right theology or get the right practice. Our concern for young people is that they come to know Jesus, that the Holy Spirit is at work in their life, and we need to trust that if we can help them know Jesus and have the Holy Spirit work in their life, then God will sort the rest out. Yeah, we don't need to convince them of all these other things. We just need to drag them, however we can, get them with Jesus and let him sort it out. Just going to throw some other random thoughts at you. We live in a world that is marketed as new and improved, so new is always seen as better. This can be a real challenge for us, but at the same time, it's really, really interesting. We live in a world where we're marketed to get the new car, to get the new everything. New is hip, cool, happening. New is good, old is a bit daggy. But at the same time, we live in a kind of hipster vintage culture as well, where certain parts of the old are actually cool, and certain parts of rediscovering history and kind of that vintage thing is actually quite attractive, and rediscovering those parts of our history and our past that we really like. So there's a good tension there to enjoy, I suppose. A really good quote from Mark Sayers in talking about the role of the church in our modern context in Australia. He says, for years and years, a church has tried to be culturally relevant. You got the seeker-sensitive services, and all that kind of stuff, and trying to have hip happening worship, all those things. Mark Sayers actually says the role of the church in the 21st century is we need to move from trying to be culturally relevant to gospel. We need to move from cultural relevance to gospel resilience. As in, we've had this kind of period where we've tried to be as cool as the culture, and we're realizing that that hasn't worked, that's failed. And so the true stance of the church needs to be of gospel resilience, that whatever culture we find ourselves in, we have a resilient and robust and deep understanding of the gospel and how to live that out, and how to engage with our culture with a resilient gospel message. And so that's much more important than being hip and cool and happening, having the latest worship band look, style, whatever. Is actually how can we form true disciples in Jesus that have a resilience in the gospel, that can stand strong in whatever culture it finds ourselves. I read an article recently where a guy talked about the second Exodus, and he's saying, the kind of idea was that in Australia, we find ourselves in a second Exodus where Christianity is being pushed to the margins of culture. And so what does this mean for how we live out and witness and be the church and be the gospel in that place? So that's a really interesting thing. And I think what Mark says is saying there is that shift from cultural relevance to gospel resilience is really, really something I really like. So what else we got here? Sorry about this. Let me just take some time to look up some thoughts. I think when you're having a conversation today and you're talking about different things that you're going to do for young people in your setting, I think a really important thing to remember is that the key is not to change your programs, it is to change your culture. Yeah. Often I have people talk to me about not having young people in their church, and their solution, often what they say to me is, Tom, help us start a youth group. So the solution to not having young people in their church is to start a program, and I just go, oh, really? That's not going to work. Okay. The solution to this is not programs, it is culture. Yeah. So we need to be asking, how are we changing the culture of our churches? How are we changing the communities that our young people exist in and find themselves in? Because that's actually much harder. It's easy to start a program. It's easy to run a thing. It's much harder to change the culture of a community so that young people are valued and treasured, and their faith is celebrated, and their faith is valued, and what they bring and give to the community is important. And that's actually really hard, but that's the important distinction we need to make, that it's not about programs, it's about culture. So I encourage you today, as you have conversations, when you're talking about what are we going to do, how are we going to implement changes in our church, please steer away from programs and talk about how we're going to change the culture of our community. How are we going to make our community a place where it feels like young people are central. Young people are important, and because young people will feel and understand that as well. So, yep, I'm not saying programs can't be a part of that, but we need to always be thinking beyond programs to what's the culture of our community and how can we change the culture. So, I think that's about it at the moment. One last thought is often when I have these kind of conversations and we talk about this research, I have a lot of people get really defensive about their church or about worship, liturgy, theology, all that kind of stuff. That's understandable and really true, but I think kind of frustrates me because people seem to get fired up about that. And for me, one thing I want to just leave you with today is please don't defend the church, defend the faith of young people. I'm not saying the church isn't important, but I'm saying our role today isn't to defend the practices of church. We aren't here to fight for the way our church practices. We're here to fight for the faith of our young people. For me, I think like this is a life and death thing. You know, if we believe in heaven and hell, then actually the faith of our young people is a life and death struggle. And so that needs to be our focus. We're not here to defend the church. We're here to defend the faith of our young people. One of the wonderful things about us Lutherans is our great theology, but it's one of our weaknesses as well because we are so obsessed with getting our great theology right that sometimes that can be at the expense of other things. What I find with young people is that they don't care about having right theology or getting grace correct, or they don't need perfect dogma. What they need is people that love them and people that love Jesus. It's as simple as that. They don't need our right theology. They need our love. They need our understanding. They need us to point them to Jesus, and He'll figure out all that other stuff later. He'll point them in the right direction. So please, we're here to fight for young people today. We are here to pursue them with the love of Jesus and help them to pursue the love of Jesus. And that is most important, that is central, that is key, that is bigger than anything else. If we want to grow our church, we won't grow our church through right theology, even though that's important. We will grow our church through loving people and drawing them into the presence of Jesus. And that is what makes a difference. So I encourage you to keep your focus clear today and really have some good conversations, really, and challenge and push yourself. And when things come up, really ask, why is that a concern? Why are we talking about this? What's this going to achieve? And remember, it's about culture, not programs. So have a great day, guys. I hope I haven't waffled on too much. Skype me if you need to later. That'd be cool. But please, humble yourselves. We are here to advocate for young people in our church and for their faith. So thank you so much for your presence. Have a great day, and back to you in the studio, Amber and Lee.